Okay, this is the first of the regular class videos for the Anthropology 200 Cultural Anthropology. So what I want to do first is we'll just sort of walk through what you would see and what you'll see in Canvas. I tried this a second ago, it didn't work, so hopefully this will pop up. Let's see if this does its thing. Yay, okay. So what you see here is what you guys will see when you're in Canvas, assuming you check on this Monday when you're supposed to. So this is what you've got. So when you go through this stuff, Canvas is pretty straightforward. I think it's sort of clunky, but it does what it does, and it does sort of an okay job. Initially, I'm going to be posting the videos as YouTube links because that's the way I've done the last couple of semesters. We have a new program which we just found out about this last week called Panopto, which I'm going to try to upload because apparently you can access those directly in Canvas and it has some benefits. And at worst, you can use it like a YouTube video. I don't know. We'll see. So anyways, assume you're going to see YouTube video links for these videos. So when you're looking at the semester material, you already should have got the introduction for the course. I sent that out, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. You've got a set of readings you're supposed to do. And this is tied to your text, the Henry and the Miller. As I think I mentioned in the intro, the Henry is a really good text. It's one of the basic sort of intro texts, but it's a good one. It's much easier to read, much more interesting than most of them. The Miller is a fascinating book, which is sort of symptomatic of what I'd call new anthropology, looking at issues and situations and conditions in contemporary societies versus sort of the classic anthropology, which would be studying the other in some place, different or even, maybe exotic. So Miller is a good example. Not only is it a good example of anthropology, but it's also sort of useful in that sort of this is the direction or trend that anthropology is moving into. I've been trying to access the PDFs, and I'm not sure why, but I'm getting it just keeps on spinning. If you guys have that happen, let me know, and I'll just send you the links to the PDFs. I don't know what that's going on. I think it might be because the course hasn't technically opened yet. There's two of the things I want you to actually take a look at here. One's a really clever video. It's a guy that's got, in my view, way too much free time. That's generated a whole series of videos about sort of different aspects of introductory parts of anthropology. I assume he teaches cultural anthro somewhere, and these are actually set up for that. They're pretty sophisticated and they're pretty good. So here's the first one here. So I want you to take a look at that. And there's no unlike most of them, there's no reaction for this particular one. I just want to sort of get used to it and see it because it's a really good reference. And there's a bunch of other ones that you can use as reference, sort of use in addition to the readings if you want more detail or say a different approach to things. The next are two very short, couple of paragraph PDFs I grabbed off of websites, which basically, one is basically what is the different branches of anthropology in general. And secondly, specifically, what is cultural anthropology? It's done by National Park Service. They're very, very short. They're very good explanations, and they're very succinct. And it's easier to consume those than for me to write up something entirely different than have you go through that. The last of the first sessions is basically looking at the first of your actual reaction videos. And this is something I've been sort of looking at off and on now for about 3 years, I guess, which is this idea of digital reality, which is actually also a course that I teach. And this is sort of the aspects of the world that we tend to think of as digital that have become real. And in some ways, to me, sort of a fascinating sort of icon of all of this would be Hatsune Miku, or more actually the Vocaloids. So watch the video. It's only about 2 minutes long. Pay attention to the crowd, not just the performance, and pay attention to what type of performance it is, and then go and answer these reaction questions. I think you'll find it entertaining and certainly thought-provoking. That's the intent. This will be the videos that you get that I want reactions to are generally going to be videos like that. They're going to be videos that are intended to make you think about what you're viewing, but also making you think about the world you think of as normal. And that's really what anthropology is. Anthropology is the study of people. It's the study of people within the context that the group is a significant part of what makes us who we are. If you want to think of it this way, think of the word that we'll get into. You've probably already heard it, but we're going to get into it early this semester, which is the idea of norms, in the sense of normative behavior, normative values, the normal way of doing things. This is very, very, very culturally or group specific. And it's in many ways sort of what you might call the centerpiece of anthropology. Because if you actually look at anthropology, let's segue here. If you segue to what anthropology is, back over 100 years ago, I think it was Austrian anthropologist who was doing research in the Western Pacific in Melanesia, came up with, I think in many ways, we now sort of consider to be the standard definition of what we do. What we do is we try to explain how a group sees the world and operates in the world around them, both to members of that group, but also more importantly to folks who are not part of that group. So for example, going to your first video, the Hatsune Miku video, when you look at that, she's very, very much a part of contemporary Japanese society. So she's a Japanese cultural phenomena. The fact that she exists in the way that she exists and the audiences look at her the way they look at her is a reflection of contemporary Japanese values and attitudes, Japanese norms, or Japanese idea of normal. If you do performances somewhere else, you could argue that they're not going to see her the same way because other groups outside of Japan don't have the same view of digital or avatars or robots or anything like that that the Japanese do. Japanese have a very distinctive package of that. Having said that, if you notice I think that particular one, if not at the bottom, I've got a second video. She's a global phenomenon. She works to sell out concerts. She did a sellout concert series that had been canceled, I think, in February in Europe, and then was going to come to the United States. I think that was her second or third tour of the U.S., and she's been at sold-out concerts for the last, 2 or 3 tours. So she's popular outside of Japan with folks that are not part of Japanese normative behavior, Japanese norms. Having said that, you could probably make a good argument that folks, for example, in Los Angeles, watching a Hatsune Miku concert, who are sort of classic American in terms of their norms and values, probably don't see her the same way as a group of sort of normative valued Japanese in, say, Osaka or someplace like that. And that would actually be something that anthropologists would look at. One is, how do the groups look at her? How does that differ? And what does that say about the group's norms and values? And then you would write that up to explain to both Americans how they see her, but also to explain to Americans how Japanese see her. And likewise, you can write it up in Japanese for Japanese, et cetera, et cetera. So what anthropologists do, and what we see as our main goal, is to make sense of the way that people view and operate in the world around us. And then what our job as anthropologists is sort of like a translator. We put that in a context and make that understandable to others. Now, a key part of anthropology, which gets sort of complicated, we'll see this in the next video, is that in anthropology, you have to remember, or I should say in cultures or in groups, most people don't really function with thinking about norms all the time. They very rarely think about the norms or attitudes that make up what they consider normal. You grew up in it, you've been raised in it, you do it automatically. It's almost subliminal. So you can, in being a member of a group, that doesn't necessarily mean you've got a lot of understanding on why you do stuff. You just know that's the way it's supposed to be done. So anthropology has benefits for folks inside a group almost as much as it does for folks outside of a group. Because in translation, oftentimes you learn more about yourself than necessarily you learn about someone else. And getting that type of insight is very much one of the major goals of anthropology, and we'll see it a lot this semester. So that sort of covers the initial part of the course material. Let's see. Okay, let's stop with that.